It says 1 till over there on that side.
Right.
You're live.
I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. Mr. Root, if you want to do the invocation.
Lord, this meeting be invited. Well, Father, thank you for this day. May the rest of the days you live on this earth. Do good. Really, just pray this time with the events of last night that we'd have a special appreciation for the fact that tomorrows are not guaranteed. Promise of them, they're gifts. Take it as such. To be grateful and to be kind to one another. So, those events and all that's going on throughout the world bring this meeting into perspective and greater appreciation for the need to rely on you, wisdom greater than ours. So this meeting, let it be yours.
Moving on to approval of the meeting minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second? Second. Discussion or any questions? I only have one on page 4. Says miss, and then there's no name suggested. Third paragraph down.
Yes, sir. It's got to be with us.
Any other questions or amendments? Do I hear a vote to approve? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Sir?
Public comment? I think I saw a couple people sign up.
No, no one signed up.
Thank you.
Sir? I remember to do that.
DeVoe Blackston?
Yes, I'm DeVoe Blackston.
If you could go to the microphone and
Change it around.
and we allow 3 minutes per person on this.
I own property on 123 between the lake and Seneca on both sides, coming up on both sides all the way through Seneca. And this will destroy this overdraft corridor thing. It will destroy the value of the property. You know, real estate's just finally making a comeback, and this is going to really tear into it and really destroy the property value. This is more or less commercial through here, through this area, and we certainly don't need this highway corridor overlay thing drafted, because it will do nothing but hurt the development between that area proposed. And, you know, I heard it through Miss Barnett told me about the thing was coming up. No property owners, I've talked to several, some of them couldn't make it tonight, but nobody was aware of this thing. And I think when you start trying to do something to affect property owners, they need to be aware of what's going on. I mean, you know, it's difficult enough in business without every time you turn around having to defend your property because somebody's trying to propose something that's so ridiculous to destroy your property values. I mean, today we got property taxes notices. They've gone up on property taxes, a lot of them. And we just, you know, it's a day-to-day thing to try to protect your interests. And it's getting to the point it's harassment to own property and try to defend your rights, your property rights, and protect your value. And I think this highway corridor overlay thing needs to be abandoned. And I would appreciate every effort to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Markovich?
Good evening, y'all. A couple of real quick points. I have not had a chance to really sit down and go through this second draft or third draft, whatever it is. But specifically, I did notice something that stood out to me when it comes down to this area that's talking about open space and tree preservation standards. It says, and I quote, "The purpose of impervious surface standards is to allow rain time and opportunity for the rain to be absorbed into the on-site soil and prevent erosion and runoff." Well, number one, we can't develop these properties without getting DHEC to sign off on these, period. And we're gonna have to submit a plan that takes care of all that rainwater, signed off by engineers as it is. And it takes care of sheet flow, it takes care of inundation rains, it takes care of the whole 9 yards. So why we need to put another thing in here that's saying, well, we're gonna take care of, and this is why we're doing this with impervious surfaces and why we need this area. We're already doing that. So I don't see how adding on to it is gonna change that. Two, tree preservation. You've heard me say before, that makes me very antsy. And when we start having to try and design properties around a tree that's 12 inches in caliper at a 4-foot height, that can get really difficult because you can have an awful lot of trees that are that big in a very small area on a piece of property. And you just can't start designing around these trees. You gotta, I mean, if you've got some big majestic tree there, that it may make sense to try and design around it if it's fairly healthy. But you gotta be really careful when all of a sudden now you're designing around trees instead of trying to design for the specific use that you're trying to give, whether it's retail or whatever. So anyway, that's something to think about. Also, I'm not sure what's brought this thing up with planned development and why we're looking at changes in it. In my knowledge, we've only approved one change to planned development in the whole time we've had zoning in this county. So it's not like there's a rush to and now all of a sudden we want to start again, we're going back to green space, open space, and we're trying to write in a thing where it doesn't look like we have a whole lot of people that are trying to rush into that as it is. And so I'm not quite sure what's precipitating this need for a change. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Just a few words about corridor. When you start this, where does it stop? I've got the answer. It doesn't. Once you get the stinky foot in the door, that's the end of private property rights if you own road frontage anywhere in the county. And you know it'll happen. I know it'll happen. Take into consideration, you need to understand that these corridors that you're talking about were originally carved from private property. Originally, some of them may have been toll roads. They were originally donated. In the case of my family, we gave up something over 6 acres of our land for a public right-of-way. We gave it up. Now I wish we still had it, a dirt road, because it's a racetrack. In addition to giving up these right-of-ways with no compensation, now everybody's compensated in this day and time now. They don't give right-of-ways away anymore, but we did. We gave up easements for water lines, sewer lines, power lines, what have you, any utility. We gave that up with no compensation. So now you're proposing to come back and kind of, in a land grab the rest of it with a 500-foot overlay. Do you really think that's the right thing to do? We're all American citizens here. You need to look at the founding principles of this great country. We don't do this to each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Staff update?
Yes, sir. Not a whole lot to report. We are hiring a third planner. Her name's Sherry. She's come out of Anderson. She'll be here probably for the next meeting. Just to help, especially on the comp plan updates, as well as some other items that we're a little behind on. So that's the big news from planning and zoning.
Okay. All righty. Let's see, and then we're moving to, vote on interim planning commission vice chairman. Like to open the floor for nominations?
I think you're doing a fine job.
I might be sick sometime soon, so. Do I hear a nomination for a vice chairman?
I'll nominate this gentleman right here.
Does that require a second?
It does not, you just see if there's any other nominations.
Are there any other nominations? Don't everybody jump at one time. All right. With that, I'll close the floor for nominations and take a vote. All those in favor of Mr. Pearson being vice chairman, say aye.
I have a question before we do that, if we can.
Yep.
Once we get the new member on, will that be changed? Or is this, do they get a vote?
It's just, Mr. Pearson's just interim vice chair as Mr. Kisker's moved up to acting chair until you get once you get a new District 3 rep. That's what y'all wanted to hold off until then you'll have Mr. Pearson will move off the slate as the interim vice chair. Mr. Kisker will be the vice chair getting a vote for chair. So yes, temporary.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, proposed corridor overlay. Update from staff.
Yes, sir, if I may. I took this, and it's exactly what you have on your desk. It's also in your packet. There's been no change of language. I just broke down each section. So it's individual. It's just so we can stay focused on exactly what we're talking about. So if you have, we don't necessarily all have to agree, so to speak, but we do have to at least come to terms with, okay, some people want thing A and thing B. We got to have something. If we're going to have an argument about something, or a discussion about something, let's have it here. And then when we're in front of a workshop or council, we can talk to them at least from both sides of the coin. So also, once again, I wouldn't do this kind of backwards for me, so because I kind of came to this not at the very beginning. So I apologize for this very long, extremely long PowerPoint presentation, but this will be the only time this happens. So just bear with me through this one, and it'll go a little different the next time. So at the beginning, does anybody have any questions, comments, or other remarks, things they'd like to change? Now, the first few pages are the preamble overlay that apply to all corridors. Mr. Root went through them to make sure they're legal.
So just to be clear, this, what you gave us tonight, follows the information.
It's
in the
100%
back.
the same.
It's just more clear.
Yep, just to keep us focused.
Okay, all right.
In a slide-by-slide format. I had nothing to say in that first paragraph. Nothing to say in the second slide either.
So we're all going the first one, overlay districts?
Yep.
Okay. Title, what's in a name? Ask the control-free district. Everything good here?
Yes.
All right. This is the definition for it.
Under definition, it says major commercial gateways. I think that could come up for legal debate at some point in the future. I'm not the attorney, but I would think that major would be stricken as a term, a defining term. Because we're going to define what corridor in the future. And if all of a sudden major is in there, could that not be argued?
I don't see there being a legal impediment, but I don't see any problem with it being stricken either. It gives a guide on what you're looking for. You're not looking at council's intent, I guess, is not, as I understood it when council directed talking to y'all was for the major gateway. But either way, I mean, in there or not, it doesn't rise or fall on it.
My question is that as we are planning for the future, which is what our job is, right now our commercial gateways are going to be enhanced in the future over what they are currently. And this is major commercial gateways. I think if tomorrow that could be argued, 20 years from now, all of a sudden it's now a major commercial gateway. If that makes sense in what I'm trying to get at. I just think we should strike the word major.
All right. Fine with me. How does the rest of the commission feel?
Agree.
Agree.
I agree.
I've got a question about the term gateway. We've been discussing Highway 123 from the Pickens County line to the Georgia line. Well, the section between Seneca and Westminster is not a gateway to anything. If it's gonna be a gateway, it needs to adjoin someplace that's entering Oconee County.
Well, from Atlanta, you get up Highway 11 onto 123, so that part of 123 would be a gateway. Is that where you're talking about? I mean, I don't know where you get to
What's it a
Atlanta.
gateway to and from?
From Atlanta, anywhere south of the South Carolina line would be the gateway to Seneca. Would be Highway 11 or Toccoa. I mean, how else would you come to Seneca?
Well, if, with that logic, every foot of every road's a gateway to somewhere
Well,
else.
there's national terminology for what gateway means. I mean, my only thought is what would you consider the gateways?
I would think if it's a gateway, it's a gate to enter Oconee County.
Right. So if you're entering from Georgia, what would be the best gateways to come into Seneca
Whether
from there?
it's Highway 11 or Highway 123, but the gate is where you come in, it isn't where you travel after you get in. We're Oconee County here. We're not the city of Seneca here.
Right, right. No, that's true.
If we're addressing the gateway to Oconee County, which is really what we have business addressing,
So it'd be 123 from Toccoa then?
from Toccoa coming in to Westminster, from Clemson coming into Seneca, but the
Gotcha.
section between Seneca and Westminster is not a gateway.
If I may,
No.
what would you call it then? If we gateways and what else? Because it's no problem for me to add an additional
Well,
word if we want to say gateways or something else.
If we want to do the whole road, I don't think the term gateway applies, just leave it off. It's a corridor.
Any,
Going back to, we were given a task by county council to come up with corridor overlays, whatever they were. We started with 123 because that was the obvious one. And we were trying to then go back and do a generic or simple introduction, and then we were gonna identify corridors later, or which one they are. And to sit here and have a 30-minute argument over the word gateway, I think we're getting a little nitpicky. So, again, we're trying to keep this as simple and as friendly as we can as far as terminology and, whether it's, gateway definition, I don't know what the definition in the dictionary says, but Mr. Root wants to say something.
Yeah, Mr. Kissinger, Chairman, if I could, just as you stated, we have the next couple of meetings, if we have this back on the agenda next time, to prepare for the workshop with council, and I think this is where Adam has us going right now, is to get checkoffs on this, any major problems for that meeting with council, let's address them now, any major disagreements. If there's things that you have notions about, then we'll hit them now so we can get that framed up, but a lot of it's gonna evolve when we get the opinions of those 5 folks, and it's gonna evolve thereafter, or get ditched, or who knows what. But, so I agree, I think if we get too bogged down, we won't make it through.
Right.
But with that in mind, and Mr. Gramley's comments in mind, and Mr. Johnson's, we'll have it written so major is optional, and we'll have another term or two for gateway. Next go.
Thank you. And again, just to remind everybody, this is, as Mr. Root said, in preparation for our workshop with county council. So anything we're doing here tonight is to put together, so when we sit down with county council, we have something to start with or end with, but this is what we were instructed to do, and so we're doing it. Item 3.
Yes, sir. Intent?
Okay, everybody good? 4, boundaries. Adam, I don't know if you want me to lead these, or do you want to lead these?
No,
It doesn't matter.
You're perfectly doing, I will,
Okay,
happy to chime
boundaries.
in
Okay.
at any point, just as long as everybody's, no one's being,
Okay.
left behind or anything like that, as long as everyone's in agreement with it. The that's, once again, this is all just applicable to all the corridors, so that's why there's no specific on it.
Okay.
5B,
And we're on 4.
oh, sorry.
Everybody good with 4?
We'll get to.
All right. On to 5. Go, Mike.
5B, it's describing the uses, everything except single-family or multifamily. When we're really trying to affect commercial appearance, is that, I'm guessing, worded in the most correct legal fashion? It says this is, you're gonna be controlled in everything except single-family residential. Does that affect what single-family residential might do on their own personal property in all non-commercial application? And I'm just trying to get clarification on that.
Related, I'm not sure what we say.
So 5B, it says that the corridor overlay regulations shall apply to all uses on the property inside the corridor except for detached single-family housing. What about my barn? What about my shop? What about my RV storage? Is all of that under the heading of single-family residential, detached single-family housing?
Right. If I understand you correctly, you'd rather it say the commercial, or have an option for it to just say commercial. This is nothing new here. This has been the same wording for the last 4 or 5 times.
I just want to make sure that we're clear in that this corridor overlay shall only affect commercial and shall not affect anything to do with anybody's residential housing, whether they want to put up a barn or whether they want to put up a private personal shop or anything like that. This is storefront kind of commercial in my view of it.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know in that wording, what is detached single-family housing? Does that mean it's going to affect my barn or my shop or?
Probably implicit in there, a lot of things are gonna have to be implicit or it'd be too long. But with that, we could have add ancillary structures or related structures, or we could come up with some wording that would make it confined to residential versus commercial. The biggest problem I think with that was hitting as I understood it, they wanted to have the multifamily structures covered within it as an option.
And again, if this is worded the right way, it just didn't have commercial in there, but it did have detached single-family housing, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't affecting housing of private residences.
So you just want to make sure your garage doesn't have to be in whatever design fashion we have if it's detached. I believe that's what this says.
Or some other structure. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of detached single-family housing has an application to it when you're talking about a subdivision HOA rule or something. And all of a sudden, does that mean that my barn has to now comply, since it says everything must comply except for the house?
You can
That
have
was
the
my only
accessory
question.
building.
It's uses is the.
Okay,
defining term,
and
but-
again, if you're doing it, if it's set up the right way, I sure don't want to get in the way of legality.
No, there's a trade-off, I guess, between having some economy of language throughout the whole thing and a 50-page ordinance. So this is one that you can add ancillary structures or having, using the word uses, meaning everything related to a single-family residence. Either way, I'm fine with it, but I'm fine, we'll just put ancillary structures in
I like
for the next one.
ancillary structures. Sounds
I just want to make sure that it does not affect individual homeowners, period, because they don't need any more regulation on them. Just because commercial buildings are going up around them, it should not affect them in any way.
Correct.
And I have personally had the experience where it's left for interpretation by the person in the planning commission. We don't need to have to leave that open for interpretation, because if Adam's gone and doesn't know where our intent was, is the next person gonna say, well, excuse me, well, they didn't specify that it doesn't affect their barn or doesn't affect their garage or whatever? Are they gonna interpret it as only the house?
It could be easier if y'all are of the mind. I don't remember when the multifamily housing group came in. I mean, certainly it could be easier if we just make it commercial and residential. Residential still does multifamily buildings. Do y'all want those included in there as a possibility? And we can, like I said, this is gearing it up for further discussion. Let's just do that. We'll reword it in a way that covers it, add in ancillary structures, and then have an option that just says residential, commercial, in the simplest way. And then see how the debate goes from there. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, where does multifamily come in though, then?
It's still gonna be in B. We're just gonna have kind of like a different paragraph B, 2 options for that paragraph.
Okay, all right.
As I'm reading this, single-family housing and multi-family housing developments, are both accepted?
As it's written here, it was gonna be multifamily housing structures up to a certain number of
Right.
dwelling units within the building, I think. And that's where Adam put in the or, the red, you have 6 in one building, or it's making a bigger building than that.
Well, I mean, the multifamily's included in the exception along with single-family.
Correct. So
Okay.
as it is here, multifamily structures, if you chose that language, that had 6 or fewer dwelling units would be accepted, excluded from this. So if it was a big building, although I guess you could have smaller units in it, but assuming they went with the size of the building, then it would be subject to the corridor.
Yeah, so the question is, are we good with number 6? Meaning 6 units above, then it would fall into the regulations of the corridor.
Could we hear from Mr. Markovich?
Just one real quick. This conversation came up before, a year or so ago. And we talked at that time, one of the major differences between what is considered a residential project, even though multifamily can be residential or commercial, is that a residential builder can only build up to 16 units per building and no more than 3 stories. And we talked about that before becoming maybe that breaking point of no more than 3 stories and 16 units per building. Because that's what a residential builder is limited to. As soon as it goes over those numbers, it's automatically a commercial building.
So should we add that here?
I think, it makes sense, it's a rational basis tied into a residential builder's licensing.
I'll go for 16 instead of 6.
And there's no vote that we have necessarily that we're doing here,
Yeah.
it's just getting language that we can discuss later.
But can
Have all the right options.
a residential builder do 5 16-unit buildings in one development?
They can,
So we just got stumped there.
Right, it's not an easy one to take down. Like I said, the easiest is just to be residential in the sense of, all right, this is where people are living, this is their dwelling units versus this is where somebody's doing business.
Okay.
But that's
I would-
not a debate for an order.
Yeah, I would,
It's not my dog.
yeah.
So like, either way, y'all want to do it.
It's been my understanding that we're going through this whole exercise because of aesthetics towards the future. Aesthetics of a building that's X amount in size or X amount in size is, in my mind, where that aesthetics really stands out or not. So
I would say let's let Mr. Root come up with the commercial versus residential wording, and let's see how that goes. And that way, we're totally out of residences, and we're only dealing with commercial. 6, permitted uses. Can't be any comment on that one, I don't think. Any comments? 7, non-conforming uses.
Sorry for how wordy they are, just, I try to compress it into as few slides as possible.
Yeah. I think I read that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
for y'all, and I think we brought this up last time, this language here through, I think, the end of the generic language, is all borrowed for the most part, from what we already have in our kind of grandfathering section in 38 for other, uses. It just makes it applicable to this corridor overlay with wording that's more appropriate. So this wasn't a reinvented wheel, so to speak.
So, any comments on 7? Okay. My understanding is we asked you to identify potential corridors, and this is your answer to that question, correct?
These are the first 3 we talked about. This is 123 from Clemson to Georgia. I do have maps of other ones, but just for tonight, since we seem to be focusing on 123, I left it at that. Lisa Simmering made this map, not me, so it's awesome. But there, it shows the 3 lines on the map show 250, 500, and 1,000 feet as a buffer, as the extent of the overlay. So however you all think, I just want to show you what, visually speaking, what 250 foot, 500 foot, 1,000 foot look like, so you all can make that decision. And the names of them, Clemson, Santa Fe, and Toccoa, are just from the map. We can call them whatever we like to, just it worked out that way. So if anybody has any issue with calling those things, we'll carry them. If they do, please let me know.
Any questions? Okay. And I guess I might not be able to explain this, to the audience, that people that aren't normally here, is we're trying to come up with a generic or as simple corridor definition overlay area, and then identify corridors later, or specifically, one part, from Clemson to Seneca on the Clemson side is going to be different than from Seneca, say, out to Toccoa. So we're not trying to write one overlay for all the different potential corridors. Did I phrase that?
Yeah, that's
relatively correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. Okay, so we're moving on. Clemson Boulevard introduction.
So the first goes back to our last conversation we just had on the last 2 slides ago about multifamily and what have you. So we can adjust this to match that, or add in the same language that was on the previous slide. We were just talking about 6 or less, or 7 or more multifamily dwellings. So we can adjust that language so it matches that.
Boundaries, I think we need to agree upon a footage for now. Any suggestions?
250.
Any other suggestions?
500. I think that's right in between both. 1,000 seems a little bit much. 250 don't seem, by the time you take out the right-of-ways and all, that 250 will go down to 100 foot, or right around, could be 150 foot. That's not even a corridor. But the 500 will give us, if we take out the right-of-ways and all on the property that's already existing, that'll make about a 410, 400 foot into the property.
The 500, or these are all from center line of road, correct?
That's correct.
So it'd be either 125 each way, 250 each way, or 500 each way.
That's correct. The shoulder varies. So the lanes are about 10 foot wide, 11 foot wide.
Okay.
So that's 22 feet. And then the shoulder width varies anywhere from 40 to 90 feet, depending on where you are. So, that's 40 and 20. So it's 60 foot to, up to 140 feet, 144 feet.
I think,
So I would say that 1,000 foot, nobody here is suggesting 1,000 feet, is that correct?
I agree.
So do we want to say somewhere in the 250 to 500 and let county council and workshop?
My vote would be 500.
I vote for the minimum possible,
And
the least impact
our
on the
property
homeowners.
owner that is here tonight has suggested 0. We need to do the least possible to affect our property owners the least.
Well, then if we do 0, this whole overlay is,
No good.
we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Well, that'd work for me, but I think we gotta do what the council wants here. But
Okay.
let's go with a minimum.
I can put both on there,
Do we
250 and
take a
500. Yeah, definitely. I put
sorry?
them both on, I can put them both on there. They're definitely both options. We can give multiple options. and-
Okay, all right. Take out 1,000 feet and we'll leave 250, 500
Yes, sir.
for county council. Building placement.
And those red pound marks are just, the hashtags are just because placement, since the sections seem to move around with the various iterations. So it's just a placeholder for whatever section that would become.
Any objections on building placement?
Just
Comments? Mike?
You know, I'm having trouble understanding, but that may just be me. The all applicable facades, if the back is facing the road, does that mean that the back needs to be addressed? Yes. Okay, that's, whatever the view is in view is the part to me that should also be addressed. And if that's what that says,
In view of
in view of the road, in view of the corridor.
The front side of the building is encouraged to be parallel to Clemson. Yeah, that's the way it reads, in my, way I'm reading.
That all the applicable facades must be incorporated.
That's basically what it says.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, setbacks.
So this is direct, if I may, this is directly related to parking, which is the next section. So, the reason why I put, 0 or no setback from the front was because initially we looked at parking in the rear. So if we want to park it in the rear, we're pushing the buildings forward. So if we push the buildings forward, we shouldn't be pushing them back as well and kind of minimizing building area. So depending on where we put the parking, we can address the setback. So if we think when we get the parking that we want to have, you can park it anywhere, we can leave the setbacks as they are. If we're going to have them park it in the rear, I'd suggest we minimize the front setback so as to give them the developers as much building space as possible.
Chairman, should we not skip this, go to, when we get to parking, then come back to this, and whatever we decide on the parking, then it'll pretty much work this out, and then we can go there? I don't agree with not having any setbacks. Because if it's control-free, it already automatically has a 25-foot setback.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. Is that okay, Adam?
Yeah, definitely. Skip ahead. That's
All right. Shipping, number 3, shipping and receiving.
I'm in disagreement with that.
I think the developers should be able to design the property to where it best suits the person that's using the property.
I agree to that to a point. I mean, if I own a business, if I want to build a business and I want to put my loading dock or my unloading dock, whatever it is, on the side of the building, I'm the one using it. The county's not using it. That's where I have the best access to bring in my product to sale. The county doesn't have a right to tell me where I can and cannot have my loading docks. I mean, you don't try to tell me I've gotta have it in the back, or I've gotta have it on the left side facing north. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, our businesses, we want our businesses here. We start telling them you can only have a loading dock here, and you can only park here, and you can only do this, and you can only do that. They're gonna look at you and say, Anderson loves us. So, I mean, I just don't think we should even have that in here. I mean, to me, let them design the building, and then if it's a conflict when they're designing, that's where staff comes in and says, well, we would like for you to think about doing this, but, you know, wherever you need your loading dock, you put it there. I mean, it just makes no sense trying to tell people that they gotta park a certain place, or they gotta have their loading dock a certain place. I mean, we don't run their business, and I know we want it to look nice, but you get to a point to where when you start regulating stuff like this, people are just gonna say bye, and we won't have any business in here.
When you got a large business like a Target store or a full-size grocery store, they've got some acreage. They're gonna put the truck in where it's more convenient for the customers to park where they want to park, and the truck can park. If you're gonna require the customers to park around back, we're gonna have to have the trucking in the front. But they'll have the trucking docks in the back and the parking in the front in these large places. Now, when you got a small storefront operation, there might be another one behind them facing the other way. They don't even have anything but a front door. Where's their truck going? I think we ought to leave it alone.
Is there any reason we can't just take it out?
I can take it out, not a problem.
Everybody in agreement?
All right.
Building, number 4, building height.
And that's currently 65 feet throughout the county. And majority of this strip is control-free district, so it'd be 65 feet. We can adjust that, lower it, leave it alone, whatever you all would like.
Explain to me how they came up with 65 feet. If I own a Holiday Inn, and I wanna put it in that corridor there, that's a commercial business. Why can't I have a 10-story Holiday Inn there instead of just a 6-story Holiday Inn?
Why can't you?
Yeah.
Because we have a height requirement. I have no other reason, I have no idea why the 65 foot is in here. I'm not sure of the rationale. Ms. McPhail probably has an answer for that.
Again, I understand the aesthetics, I guess is the word, for want it to look like this and that, but from Seneca to Clemson, just about the majority of stuff, like hotels and things, they get built to satisfy Clemson anyway. So, why are we limiting people to 6 stories?
They can go for a variance if they
But that's
don't like
another
the
step they
65
have to
feet.
go. They gotta come back over here and do all this crap. Why can't that be in that corridor at least? Why can't that be a higher number? Why can't it be?
Tom, do you have some historical data? I think this ties back to Duke, but.
Historical person here?
Yeah.
He's our resident
I'm full
historian.
of history. I've been here for a little while, so. The 65-foot comes back from when we originally had some issues with the Monte Lago project. And it came about from the average canopy height of the trees in the area. And that's solely where it came from. And it was generally decided that, that if the buildings were less than or equal to the average canopy height, then that seemed reasonable. That's where it comes from.
But now,
right or wrong?
well, but now most commercial people, they're cutting down all the darn trees anyway, so we don't have a canopy height.
If I may, also in this particular stretch, this Clemson Boulevard stretch, the airport is there, and almost the entirety of this stretch we're talking about is within the airport overlay, which is an FAA thing. So any project that goes on inside of this, Bill and I send an email to FAA, fill out a little form, and they give us their yes or no on it. So like for instance, Clemson Epic, they're putting in their, the Epic Academic Village. They put in their high-rise, their apartment building. We had to run that through the FAA because make sure, you know, an errant plane doesn't smash into it. So we don't have, it's not a land use issue, it's just strictly a height. So the higher we go, we may say, yeah, you can, but the FAA may step in and say, well, Oconee County said you can build up to 150 feet, but we're only gonna allow 94 feet or something of that nature. So before we maybe decide on a building height, let me see what the maximum height for that zone is. I hadn't looked at it because it hadn't been an issue, but before we kind of make an arbitrary decision, let me look and see what would be federally allowed in that.
What is the height of that water tower they just built there, right off the side of the road, from the road up? It's a little bit more than 65 feet.
I'm not sure offhand, but I can certainly ask. Is that Seneca Light and Water?
Yeah, well, and, I'm not sure.
I don't know who built it. I think it had something to do with Clemson, did it not? I think Clemson built it.
I mean, just personal comment, you know, we're supposed to be planning for the future. If we have all 2- and 3-story homes and all of a sudden we have a 12-story hotel come in, how's that gonna look as you're going down 123 or wherever? So again, it's not so much we're prohibiting, you know, we're trying to do this in order to keep the look that we want. Do we want a 10-story, you know, building on 123? So just keep that in mind on building heights. I mean, that's, to me, you know, if we keep them all, if buildings are all in a line, and that's where Montelego ran into, is it just didn't fit where they were putting it, and all of a sudden we have a 12-story hotel on 123. I don't know if that's the look we want. Just, so we'll table building heights until we get a little bit more answer.
Yes, sir. But I'll leave it as it reads, and I will
Yeah.
find out what the maximum allowable height in there as per FAA.
Yeah, and that would give people a 5-story building.
65 feet,
See,
get
yeah.
to a 6-story.
With a flat
At 10
roof.
foot.
Yeah. So that's 6-story, that's pretty tall, I mean, that's a tall building, so, all
Yeah,
right.
the true hotel, I believe, is only 4.
Yeah, most
or
hotels
5.
are 4 and under in this market, I would say. Fences,
We already worked this out one time. I don't think we need to keep hashing over this over and over.
yeah,
If I may, yeah, I added the asked for language was 4 foot high, which is right next to the first or, and the second part was to allow like the chain link and things of that nature along the sides and rear, so I added that.
and I think we concluded 4 feet was good, so I think, I think 5's good. Any questions?
I think there ought to be a mechanism where somebody that requires a security fence to be able to have one.
Because we don't know what kind of properties, I mean, what kind of structures are gonna be built there. We don't know what
Right.
they're gonna be used for.
By security fence, what are you talking
Yeah,
about?
define security fence.
Something that somebody can't jump over.
So,
If you're restricted to 4 feet, you're gonna have to incorporate a pretty deep moat beside it.
so you're wanting to allow them to put up a
So you want a 10, you want a 10
12 foot
foot?
with Constantine wire across the top of it, right on the side of the road?
Well, your 4-foot one would allow you to put 50-foot wide stretch of Constantine wire.
Well, I just playing devil's advocate over here.
Well,
I mean, it's whatever y'all.
and these times are what they are. Some people are gonna want a
You got a
security
point there.
fence. And 4 feet doesn't allow for that.
Anything, if I may, anything over 7 or 8 feet, I think it's over 7 feet, requires a building permit from Oconee County. So we wouldn't wanna, so we can allow it, but it's still have to, require permitting and things of that nature. Just something to think about. If we're gonna say here, oh, 7 foot, maybe that could be misread. Or say, if we say it's greater than, requires burning permit, possibly be misread. And I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, no, I don't need a permit. It says I can have a a fence in here that's of a certain height. So perhaps that might be something to think about.
I absolutely agree that if we're talking about multifamily and somebody's building a condo complex that has private gated entrance, as long as aesthetically they've met the requirements of the structure, I'm not sure why we're telling them they can only have a 4-foot fence. And if they build it out of stone or they build it out of whatever we've told them that they needed to do. Anyway.
The corridor is only gonna be pertaining to commercial for the most part. It's not gonna be pertaining to residential.
But if somebody builds
Multifamily.
a condo complex that's 6 stories high or 4 stories high, we're putting it in that commercial category. And all of a sudden, they want a big gate to come through, click to enter. I mean, I don't know that fits on any of that topography, but if it did, have we prevented it?
Which is very reasonable that if it fits, something would be built like that because that's more Clemson housing. And you definitely want a fence around something that's gonna have a bunch of students in it.
So.
Protect the students.
Might be keeping them in.
What
If you
height
keep them
would
in or
y'all,
keep the others out, but you want a fence.
what's the height that y'all are suggesting?
Do we need to put a height? Because all of a sudden, if it exceeds something, you gotta go, they restrict themselves. Once it exceeds a certain height, they gotta go through to get a building permit for it anyway.
That's correct. And if they build it out of the materials that we have, I don't know, would there any be a problem regardless if it's a 4-foot fence or a 8-foot fence or 10-foot fence or however tall? Does anybody have a issue with that?
I don't know that I have an issue with any height, but maybe I'm not thinking through it enough.
If we just put in the restriction that any fence that's facing the highway fits the aesthetic standards for the building that's going there, that ought to cover it, not restrict the height at all, other than what it's already restricted to the permit process.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I go back to, and again, I'm not, I'm in favor of less and less and less, but if we keep going less and less and less, then this started with Destination Oconee. When you're coming into these corridors, we're trying to get this, quote, rustic elegant look, and if we keep taking all this stuff out, we're wasting our time. So I'd say either we try and stick to this or we scrap this and move on to something else. And
I can add both. I mean, like we did before, we had 250 and 500 are in there. I can say 4 foot as well as remove all standards just for the conversation's sake.
I mean, fences, security is all done by cameras now. The fences, it's all cameras and remote controls and what have you, so.
So I'll add both then.
Well, the camera's not gonna keep someone out, the fence will keep someone out.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think the way it's written, just not to overcomplicate things and so y'all don't get a very new ordinance for discussion, the way it's written with the big red "or" for the discussion with council when you have the workshop gives that opportunity to say 8 foot or scrap it, because it's like a placeholder, so this is an area not necessarily have agreement right now, but it's notice for discussion. Perhaps if you get rid of it, then that discussion is missed in the workshop. Here at least it's noted that you're gonna have some discussion on it, and discussion may well end up with, let's just delete it.
Okay.
Well, the other things, I don't understand that we're restricting industrial development on this property.
Could you clarify, sir?
Suppose somebody builds a factory on some of this property, they might well want a security fence around the factory.
Yes, sir. So I've actually added a whole it's the very last page of this. It basically says industrial shall comply with all industrial, because there's a 30-foot setback for industrial in this county. And I was counting for that, because maybe we'll get maybe BMW and Toyota show up and want to build along the corridor. So we don't have to make them a giant rustic elegance looking factory. They have to apply to the industrial means. So this is almost completely directed at commercial entities, and larger multifamily or greater than such a number of multifamily. So this doesn't affect industrial, so to speak.
What
sir.
I'm getting at is an industrial outfit that needs security doesn't want a 4-foot fence.
But he's saying that the industrial doesn't have to, they'll have a whole different set of standards that they have to adhere to than this. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. It's all the standards for industrial have to, so, I mean, some industries require fencing. I'm not sure, but I imagine like a cement factory or what have you would require security fencing to keep people out of there. I don't know.
Well,
But-
if we're gonna allow industrial here, then does that not kind of defeat what the corridor is trying to establish? Because if you've got this huge plant and then you've got a house and then all of a sudden we have rustic elegance, to me, it doesn't make sense.
If I may, I can certainly add that industrial uses are not allowed.
No, I
Oh,
don't want
okay.
that. I'm just saying, what's the point of having all of this rustic elegance if everybody doesn't have to stick to it? Because you're gonna have bits and pieces of it.
I can certainly make industry have to do some kind of something that you all would like. Certainly, that's not an issue at all.
Well, just glancing at the back page here, it says any possible zoned industrial. So, if they build something on a control-free, they don't have to follow this, they have to follow the.
That's correct.
So they would, and there was, if a BMW plant came up and wanted to build somewhere on 123, and it's still control-free, and they can do that, they don't get rezoned, then they have to follow the corridor plan, not
Correct.
the industrial thing. So they would have to do the front of their building and follow the guidelines of this corridor. The rest of the building can be whatever, but the front that faces the road would have to be a certain thing.
But
That's correct.
we'll hit industrial when we hit industrial. Keep things moving.
Yes, sir.
6, sidewalks. Any questions here?
Nope.
7, other pedestrian amenities. I think this is where we get into some trees.
If I may, sir, I highlighted the property owners jointly and severally responsible for maintenance, that keep all towards the bottom, number 3. I believe Mr. Markovich had an issue with that last time. I don't know enough to say that it is necessarily an evil or not. I just want to highlight it as a citizen came up and pointed out that that's something that they wouldn't be a fan of. That's up for you all to discuss. It can be left in or removed.
We've got, someone has to be required to maintain these open spaces, because, I mean, if nobody maintains them, then I don't know that we should say you're gonna have to do this, because most people that have open spaces maintain them anyway. They want them, the grass mowed, they want the trees pruned and trimmed and kept a certain way. That's the reason they have the open spaces. So, do we have to tell them that something they already know?
We can certainly remove it.
Couldn't I just read property owners and leave out the rest of that?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, did this come from the Lancaster?
Directly.
It's the Lancaster language. The joint and several liability or responsibility here means they're all responsible and everyone is responsible. So it's the most broad form of gathering everyone to be responsible. I don't see that it's any problem just striking that whole, if that's what you're thinking about, a whole underlying portion, and just noting the responsibility that's gonna be maintained. Then that essentially puts the onus or the burden on the agreement between, if there's a property owner and a tenant, that, all right, and they're usually gonna have those.
Right.
They should always have those in their lease agreement or whatever, who's gonna be responsible for it.
Who's
So I don't know that you have to
responsible
have
for
this joint
enforcing
several.
this?
I'm sorry. Well,
who's responsible for enforcing?
Yeah, it'd probably be me, sir.
I mean, if the lawn's not mowed or something, who's gonna call who?
If I may, so right now we operate under something called the International Property Maintenance Code, and technically we do already have that in our code. Grass mowing is already there. It exists today. So, and I do get phone calls about people not cutting their grass. So that already exists. So that institution of how we handle that's already somewhat worked out.
So we can strike this.
Well, do the police enforce it, or have we got a lawnmower guy that enforces it, or how's it work now?
I'd be certainly happy to walk you through that process, how people kind of enter complaints and how I handle them. I'd be happy to do that for you if we want to do that now, or.
No, we don't.
Well, I'm just thinking if we don't enforce it, I don't know why we're gonna put a law on the books if we're not gonna enforce it.
It is enforced. I mean,
If
Reader's Digest version, real quick.
Yeah, if somebody calls me, complains, I write them a strongly worded letter, and then if they don't follow up, I'll just keep on with them. And we do have some ability to do some things. That's the elevator speech of it at the moment.
Yeah. And I think building codes can also get involved
Yeah,
at some point.
that's correct. Anything with building codes and property maintenance, building codes can involved.
Can we go with the attorney's suggestion about, or striking this and putting in there that it is required to be maintained? And like you said, the property owner, if he wants the tenant to maintain it, then he's gonna tell the tenant, you have to maintain this.
Right.
Instead of putting this whole long sentence in there.
Yep. Everybody vote for striking that?
Yep.
So stricken. I think last meeting, and again, we brought up trees and visibility. I think that was, so I don't know if we want to deal with section II, or leave that as it is.
I don't think we need trees, in this, along the road where you're having signs and you're having cars pull out. I just think it's a safety issue myself.
I don't think they can put signs in, trees and stuff in right-of-ways, so they would be back actually on the property.
Well, the last sentence of that, trees and other vegetation must be planted and maintained so as not to cause hazard or nuisance, so.
So if I may, so this is actually a fairly common question, just because it's not the clearest thing. Just because we're dealing with such a large shoulder, that 40 to 90 feet that SCDOT has, so anything that we're talking about stops 40 to 90 feet from the road, and then it's all clear cut. So if you've driven down 123, it's just grass upon grass upon grass. So anything that would be planted up there, and where the driveways come out to encroach upon 123, they keep it pretty much buzz cut. Like I think quarterly they cut these things. So anything, trees, signage, anything else that these buildings are going to have are going to be at the property line and back, which doesn't start for 40 to 90 feet off of the thing. But you wouldn't be able to see the buildings if you did plant a bunch of, like a forest in front of the buildings as well. So.
All right.
And these trees can be taken up parking space as well if we require a certain amount of trees in front of the buildings.
Well, the trees are in the green space that we're requiring, correct? Yeah.
Correct. There's not, this particular portion isn't mandating where any sort of this space should be. They should be accessible from sidewalks and other pedestrian circulation within the development. So if they perhaps make a courtyard or some kind of, internal green space inside or behind it, usually probably not along the road, I'm just assuming, I don't know, but I wouldn't put one along the road, personally.
All right.
So would you like to keep that in there or take the trees out?
I'd say we keep that in for now, would be my vote. We can talk about council with that, but.
Sure.
I think that last sentence kind of makes that okay. Is everybody in agreement? Okay. One, access.
Is that even legal to say no more than one access?
Point access,
Well, per 500 feet of frontage.
one access point? Oh, great. Found the typo.
And this is talking about on the same parcel.
Sir. So that's for a mall or something of that effect, or if you had like a small strip mall, if there's 5 different businesses, they don't get 5 different entrances, they get an entrance.
Which makes sense. That's one of the reasons. the
Yeah,
corridor
which I think is
has
great,
curb
unless,
cuts in.
if that's legal to do. I mean, there's a wreck in front of one of the access points, does that now prohibit people from getting in or emergency vehicles to get in? I mean, I'm just wondering,
I believe fire safety will go over all the building plans, and if they don't feel that it's necessary, Shane Gibbs from Oconee Emergency Services goes over all the plans too. So if he feels there's something, I imagine they'll be brought up. It would be kind of a,
If the stub out thing works, you'll have curb cut every 500 feet you can get at, so.
I mean, I'm a big fan of minimum max for limited access compared to, say, Easley or even Clemson, where it's hard to get down the road with people trying to turn in or turn out. And I think we're doing a good job by trying to address it. Encouraging neighbors to share that driveway access in and out, I think is a good thing, because again, if there is a wreck at your driveway, to be able to access the next one would be great, if it could be encouraged. I was just asking if we have the right to say you can't have any more than one.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I know that it's not uncommon, but I can't say that I've looked at all the law on access points, how many you're entitled to, if any. I know that you can control it, I know safety comes into a factor, but I'm glad to check that out.
Yeah, to me, 500 feet seems kind of strong. And then, or do we divert back to SCDOT?
They don't have anything that I know of.
Well, this is a single parcel.
I understand.
If there's multiple parcels, at least this access isn't addressing that.
Yeah.
You could still have multiple road access if it was
You got 1,000
short parcels.
1,000 foot of road frontage. With this, you could have 2, an entrance and an exit.
All I'm doing is asking the question.
Oh, I know originally I heard 200 foot, or maybe I just.
if I may, we can definitely add other numbers if we think that. I chose 500 feet, I believe it came from, I believe a discussion at some point regarding this was like 500 feet, so I just added it. We could definitely do a portion of that more.
Off the top of your head, is there a lot of property down through there that has more than 500 foot road frontage or less, or what? It just what you looked at.
I've not measured road frontage as a parameter of me looking at it. I bet you I could find a way to look at the average size, but once people start subdividing and combining parcels and things of that nature, we could definitely, I can attempt to find that information out, the average property
That would be better
length,
to have that,
fronting.
and we could set that number accordingly.
I mean, 500 feet's almost 2 football fields. That's pretty good. That's a long stretch. But to me, 500 sounds a little, to me personally, 500's a little strong.
I know
I believe 500.
200 to me sounded
I said no, it wasn't access
like
points.
a little better, because I think we looked at them, me and Scott looked at them one time, and 200 would allow just about everybody to have at least 2, an entrance and an exit. If they, even if they subdivided out, they'd still have a way to get in and out of the property.
Go ahead.
If there's another number or, 0 or however many that we'd like to add, that's what that or is for, so we can definitely do it. Or we can just leave it as a or.
Any strong opinions?
Well, I think if we get a large business in there, like a full-size grocery store, they can be fine with one curb cut. It might be a 4-lane curb cut. Okay, they need a turning lane, but, one curb cut on, 500 or 600 foot property should be fine. Now, in particular, if you got the stub outs to the adjacent property, so, or access to behind the building to a back street or whatever, so that there's an emergency route. But, what I'm concerned about is where you got a whole bunch of half-acre lots that, have, 100 foot of road frontage.
Well, that doesn't constitute the same parcel,
No.
so that, so
I
you
mean,
get
that-
your curb,
that-
you get your
That
curb
doesn't
cut.
affect this particular
Right.
point of access.
If I may, sir, we do have that section a few pages on, we have that issue. This is just one for the commercial developments. We do have a parking access version in a few slides.
All right, so
Leave the door open and we can discuss that with
let's,
council.
let's leave that one open for council.
And Mr. Chairman, I forgot, I had a case, and a couple of cases, it was 15, 18 years ago, where we did have this issue, and it was in the low country, I think it's Somerville was one, but in any event, they put in something similar. It was lawful, but they had takings issues. The acts that people were complaining, all right, you can do this, but I'm not gonna get the same kind of customer, traffic as of this. So that was an issue that came up. It was ruled in favor, I settled really in favor of the governmental entity, but I said I didn't really know, but I did know something about it, I just forgot.
Okay.
So, leaving it like it is probably a good idea, the or.
Okay. The or, okay. Meaning, we'll discuss that with council. Okay. Signage.
If I may, I left the struck language in there, just because it was just, I asked two other people to look at it for me and try to design something for me. Just try to like sketch out something, and we couldn't come to an agreement. It was just confusing, confounding, and so. This is also where the three oars at the bottom are for the height of the monument sign for group development. So all the entities in there will utilize the same monument sign as opposed to having 10 different monument signs, as well as in areas excess of 40,000 square feet. That may be a number that care to look at, and increase to no more than 15 feet for if you have more than 40,000 square feet of development, internal.
This, to me, only regulates the height. It doesn't regulate the width of this sign. So they've got a 10-foot monument sign that can be 30 foot wide. So why are we giving them another 5 feet, per se, just because their building is 40,000 square feet or larger? I mean, they can build this sign 20 feet wide.
If I may, they can build a structure, which is that wall, what have you. They can build as long as they want to. The individual sign faces are limited.
To 15?
No, I believe no more than 70. I
Because
believe
that
no more
goes
than
back to our
75 square feet.
sign,
75 square feet.
I'm sorry?
that goes back to our sign rules that
Sorry.
we've already,
75.
And that was the question I asked you before the meeting. Do we need to complicate the issue by addressing signs since we already have a sign ordinance?
We're certainly welcome to look at removing it or look at somehow just not incorporating it into
Because
the,
from what I understand, we have a sign ordinance, then we have Appendix A. And
If-
then if we
right.
put something in here, now we're looking at 3 different places to find out what size sign we can put up. which
That's
doesn't-
correct.
Which makes life tough.
So Appendix A is only applicable if we make it applicable. Like, so Appendix A, it's sitting there, and we can grab it and say, oh, you must use Appendix A, which is fine, we can definitely do that. It's more restrictive than our current open sign code that's applicable to everything. We just have to note that signage for this is as per Appendix A.
Our car door will, and at places it does contradict all of our other codes. And it's legal to do that. We're setting standards in this particular area this is what we want in this area. And it doesn't have to follow our sign code that we already have, because it may be.
I understand.
And this might be something we ought to leave in and let council help us out deciding on what they see. They may want to do away with it altogether, or they may want to regulate the height and width or whatever. But we can do on the signs, from what I understand, we can contradict all the ordinances if we want to, which makes no sense. But the corridor is a special area of its own, and we can set the rules just for that.
I don't think we should have any stricter rules for signs in the corridor as we do in the rest of the county. It's a business district. Businesses need to advertise. Businesses need to be located. It's just my opinion. I think the signs should be able to be seen and not only 10 feet high.
Do realize this is a monument sign, goes from the ground up, not a pole sign. This is a monument sign.
Well, we have enough regulations on signs. I don't think we need an additional regulation, my opinion.
I'll second that.
I can add that.
I'll third that.
Yeah, I can
Third
add,
things?
I can definitely add that language as well. We could just have, signs for commercial retail development centers, just for clarity's sake, because if us not include it.
Right.
Someone's gonna say, oh, well, what should my signs be?
Yeah.
So just for clarity's sake, I can add as an or down there, signs for this shall follow existing Oconee County Code of Ordinances.
Bingo.
Now, we may want to look at disallowing billboards, which are allowed under the regular sign ordinance for 4-lane roads.
I'm against disallowing billboards too. Gotta let a company advertise.
Go ahead, Andy.
I thought we addressed billboards last time we revised the sign ordinance.
I believe we spoke about it as the general. This one's just for the commercial retail development centers for malls, essentially, or strip malls.
Right. Okay. I'd say put the new wording in there, tag that as we'll get council's opinion,
Yes, sir.
please. Curb cuts.
So, if I may, we're now into the parking and vehicular access. Mr. Gramling, this is where I was talking about earlier. Thank you.
I think that ought to be up to the property owner where he wants to park. And if you got a small storefront business, maybe 20 parking spaces in front of the building's plenty. But if you need to park 300 cars or 700 cars, they need to park wherever they want and not have a bunch of trees in the way.
This particular section just deals with curb cuts that we're looking at now.
Excuse me.
So that's something that we were gonna discuss with council about the 500
500.
foot.
Yes.
So we can wait on that one and let council give us direction on that.
Stub outs.
Oh, okay.
Any comments? Mr. Reed?
I was just trying to read it.
If
Yeah,
I
that
can help
one-
out with I figured the less I write, the less typos I can make. So do we want to require stub outs both ways? Do we want to require stub outs to the nearest, toward direction of the nearest development? I mean, do we just want to say stub outs are required to all adjacent parcels along the corridor?
Well, if you got a property that's got a ravine on one side that there isn't gonna be anything built there, you shouldn't have to have a stub out towards, a place that, is gonna be the end. Or if property's already developed that isn't gonna have public, traffic in it, you shouldn't have to have a stub out.
Yeah, I don't know what this means.
So,
I mean, I think I'm-
and as I was going with Mr. Grelming's train of thought, just because we require stub outs, just so maybe you go build next to, the car dealership, one of the car dealerships out there. Just because you build and we say you have to have a stub out, what if they don't want you to build into their, like, what if the only stub out you could put is like into the side of their building or what have you? So, I'm just trying to get some wording regarding the stub outs. Where should we require the stub outs?
If you have a large parcel and say it's 75 acres and you start subdividing that parcel into smaller parcels to sell off to commercial people, then there's where your stub out should be. Not, I don't know if it should be required on just a 75 acre property to build one business on, because they're not gonna need it. But if you're subdividing this property and you won't, and we're only requiring, or we would say, well, you can't have but maybe 2 entrances, because there's only, say, 1,000-foot road frontage, so you can have 2 curb cuts, then we want the stub outs to where someone can pull in here and drive down that parking lot, per se, to go to the different businesses without having to get back out on 123 and going down to the other end and pulling in. That way everybody they can shop all those stores in that area by just with the curb cuts going, I mean, the stub outs going to each parking lot. But if you sell the whole property as one lot and it's not subdivided, it's just sell it to Home Depot, then they're not gonna need to be stubbed out on each side, because we don't know what's gonna be over here. And I don't think we should require them, because that property is gonna get its curb cut anyway, because they've got the road frontage to allow it.
I don't know if it's as property line dependent as what Mr. Gramling was saying as topography dependent. If there's a big ditch, then it's not gonna happen anyway, and it doesn't matter where the property line is, it matters what the topography of the slope is, as to whether you can even connect those. Can you look and, on that section, is there something, instead of recreating the wheel, it sounds like wording is our issue, is there a way to go and look at what somebody else has done with regard to stub out? With wording, because wording seems to be where we're getting stuck here.
Exactly. I don't want to say, you have to have stub outs both directions, and then there's Lake Kiwi, or, the finger that lake goes in there, or, somewhere we can't do it.
I mean, I think and I don't want to overspeak, but I think we're all in agreement that we're trying to limit the amount of access that people are jumping on and off of 123, just from a safety standpoint. Right. Some of which is going to be covered by the DOT rules and regs, but some of it we have the ability to make at least suggestions or recommendations. Some of the developers are doing a great job of it already. One entrance or exit for 4 or 5 businesses. But if we could encourage it by some of our wording, I think we should.
Certainly.
Would we say where possible? Stub outs where possible? Because there's some that's not gonna be possible, because of topography
Well,
and stuff.
my question is, do we need this at all? And then if we feel like we need it, it's required to all. I mean, that needs no room for negotiation, or I'm not sure if we even need this. But
I'm not sure, and I agree. I'm not sure if there's, on the one little section that we're describing here, is there enough property to even be concerned about? However, if we can tackle this thing now, and it goes to apply to different areas in the future, we've at least tackled it to some extent. And I do think that you go down through Clemson, and it's a nightmare of worried about getting hit. Same way going through Easley, as far as the amount of times they're going in and out. And if the planning commission doesn't do anything else, that is a job of a planning commission, is to try to look to the future of what traffic patterns and everything else will be.
Well, another thing is, if we're requiring most of the parking to be in the rear of the building, somebody's got a driveway from the front to go around to the rear to park. I don't see how we can make them have a stub out in front of the building so people can drive across the front of the building where they're not paving anyway, they're making it green space.
I say we'll give Adam a chance to reword this, and if not, then we'll strike it all.
Yes, sir.
How about that?
Works for me, sir.
All right?
Ooh, parking.
Parking. Section C.
If I may put in here, so the big red paragraph at the bottom, since the design standards, which are gonna come up, seem to we wanna allow flexibility. We're not in the building design business, but we wanna kind of encourage certain things. So I took a carrot and stick approach. Parking costs money. The county right now doesn't require have really any parking requirements, so to speak, which is great. That's why we don't get these big oceans of parking. However, if we also want the design standards, we can use parking as a carrot and stick. We want the buildings to look this way. We may not spell out exactly what color beige you should use, but we want beige. So if they follow the design guidelines and intent as well as to the word, they can park it essentially how they want to. If they want to put up whatever they want to put up as far as design guidelines go, their parking becomes more restrictive. So that's why this reads like this. So that's just, and this room is 50 by 40 for 100 square feet. 100, if you're looking at the.
Yes.
Okay, on this first, on number 3 here, where it says, what is it, II, parking shall be placed. Again, we need to leave that up to the developer or the company itself, whoever, if they're putting on Michael's or whatever there, let them to decide where they want their customers to park. We shouldn't require businesses, tell them you've got to park in the rear of a building. I mean, to me, that's just ridiculous. They know where their customers need to park. And when you drive down the road, if you see a building and there's no cars there, you're not gonna stop at that building, pretty much. It's just gonna die. You got the cars, if they wanna park out front, let them park out front. If they wanna park on the side, if they wanna do the back, that's fine, but I just think we need to leave that up to the company or the developer developing that lot, and quit trying to tell them they have to park in the back of a business. I mean, there's not that many down 123 that park in the back. And when you ride down there, if you see 30 cars at this business and only 2 at this one, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna stop at the one with the 30 cars because they're got a sale going. But if all of them's in the back, you're not gonna know anything and you're not gonna stop unless you just have to go in there.
It may also be where it benefits the builder to put the building on the back part of the property to not have to do as much grading to level off the parking lot if they put the parking lot in the front. So where, if we say that their parking has to be in the rear, we could be limiting what they can actually do on that property, or either they've got to move tons and tons of fill dirt to fill in that gully in the back.
Yep.
You said this was addressed a little bit later in design guidelines, or related to some of the design guidelines?
The relation is if you follow or not follow design
Right.
guidelines.
Okay, so let's, I know we've tabled a couple things to come back to, so let's go to, when we get to design guidelines, then we'll come back to parking. I think that, in my opinion, so much of this is topography related. Where's the most effective place to build, where's the most effective place for parking customers, that if we start, we might be overreaching here, in my opinion. So I say let's keep moving, and then some of these things we'll try and hit back so we can get out of here before midnight. On-street parking.
And if I may, the on-street parking is not on public roads. It's just within, like, if you built a mall, if you built if this whole thing was a private development, this road out here would be if it was a private road, the parallel parking we have out front here, that would be regulated by this. Nothing on 123 or any of the intersecting roads.
Is there nothing else that restricts that? Or is that allowable right now?
123 is a state road, so they probably don't allow parking right there. I don't know what the parking standards are along, in chapter 26 say, but I just wanted to be clear, that way people weren't saying, oh, we're just gonna let them park along the street here. On the
Whether the state allows it or not, we can't allow or disallow, it's the state.
Right, but so all this parking standard I'm saying doesn't apply to that. It's not applicable to 123. It's applicable to your property. If you want to put up like the Casto project that's going on, right there, Hartwell Village. If you want to put that up, if there was parallel parking spaces along the road, that's where this would apply to. That's the only real applicability.
Are you talking about within the development or?
Within the development is where this is the application.
On-street parking within the development is saying that it's not permitted?
On-street parking is permitted on private streets within a retail commercial development. On-street parking is not permitted on public streets within the overlay. So like Shiloh Road, you couldn't park on, any other, Pine Street, things like that, you wouldn't be able to park on.
But frontage roads or
You're saying if they built a street in their development?
Correct.
Then they could have parallel parking on that street?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And that just has to comply with SCDOT and,
On-street parking is not permitted in public streets. On-street parking is permitted. I didn't realize that we had to even discuss that.
Yeah.
Approve something that's
Right.
private street.
On-street parking.
I can't, I mean, it is, they would have to comply with, if we didn't put anything in there, if we don't point it out, you know, they have to apply to state things. So we're just kind of reiterating that they have to apply with a.
But if it's private, is it not? I mean, if it's a private, whether they've deemed that to be a parking lot or whether they've put a white stripe and deemed it to be a road, it's still their private parcel to do with. No?
Would they have?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Chair recognizes Mr. Markovich.
On this particular subject, you've got to go back to chapter 26 with the roads and that whole process. Private roads still have to come up to public standards in Oconee County. It doesn't matter if they're private or not. And there's also specific issues which were never really truly addressed when it came to the roads, and it had to do with parking spaces and how it was being affected by the fact that we were saying that private roads are in fact can be controlled as the same as a public. So this is a big kind of a gray area, okay? And it really needs to be sorted out, but it's probably a lot bigger conversation that needs to be dealt with.
Adam, are you saying like public streets within the overlay, within the corridor overlay, you can't park on them?
Correct.
So that's to keep overflow parking at a really busy restaurant, parking up and down a private, or parking down somebody's street?
Well, to create parking, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, I think that's the intent, but I don't know how that's gonna be enforced, you know?
Well,
I mean, other than through complaints.
All right, through the complaints, and I'll get those. The private road standards, because sometimes county roads can be, or private roads can be adopted by the county. If you build it to standard, a good, high enough standard, you can apply to the county, and depending on money and what have you, you could theoretically get it absorbed by the county. So thus relieving an HOA from the burden of having a road. So that's why this is being allowed, and here you can park it, but you would be able to, the county may not accept it with parking on the side.
I mean, again, this to me is, are we adding something that's really not needed? Because inside development is inside development, and they can do whatever they want, correct?
They wouldn't be able to park within the right of way. If it's required a 50-foot clear right of way, if it's a private road.
Gonna make an example of what he's talking about too. If you go to Oktoberfest, right past the entrance going into the Satoma Field there, there's a little road that goes back into houses, all back in that area.
Mm-hmm.
During Oktoberfest, everybody and their brother wants to block that road pretty much to where the people that live on that road can't even get home. That's why this will alleviate. They won't be able to do that. They won't be able to park on, and that's a private, well, it's a state or county road up so far, but, or city road. But what this will eliminate. They won't be able to do that. They'll have to either park on the property itself, anywhere that they're allowed to park, and then they can, if they have a frontage road that goes on in front of the property, they're allowed to park on that. But they're just not allowed to park on a state, county, or, private road outside the area.
Yeah,
If I may, so think of this like sidewalks. Right now, we can't have sidewalks in the county. You can't put sidewalks on without a variance. You need a special exception. I sat here when Clemson Epic had to go for their sidewalk exception to get sidewalks in there. So just think of this parking like the sidewalks. We're gonna allow something that we don't allow, generally speaking. And it is in chapter 26 of our code of ordinances. So this is just, we're allowing something to be built inside the right of way. In this case, it's a parking space, not a sidewalk.
If staff feels like this is something that should be in there, I don't think that I don't have an opinion to object to it.
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
At this point, I would like to stop the discussion on this because we have about 20 more pages, plus we have a couple more things on the agenda. And take this up at the rest of the 20 pages, I think it is, at our next meeting. That'll be right before we go before council. And continue with the agenda.
Guys, they want to pull an all-nighter?
If we do, I gotta take 5.
I'm sorry?
I said, if we do, I gotta take 5.
Okay. Any objections? Any objections from staff?
How about we just finish there's only 2 more slides, I believe. Can we just wrap this one little section up?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Number 5. Any comments?
I agree with it.
The only thing I get scared about is when we say is required. You know, is suggested, recommended. Does anybody else have any issues with that, or?
I'm good with the suggested and recommended.
Well, if we have an overlay that's nothing but suggestions, we don't need an overlay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe this ties into the stub outs that Adam's gonna look for some language on, something that's tested, so it would apply here
Okay.
as well, so maybe we'll get some of this more fine tuned, so we don't have to have that debate now.
I agree. Come back to that one. 6, parking area, landscaping and screening.
If I may, this goes back to council's request in the letter that's sent to y'all to, we don't have a sea of parking, somehow screening, that way we're not staring at it. So that's kind of where this came from.
In other words, we don't want a sea of Walmart parking lots going down 123. They wanna have some landscaping in there somewhere to sort of break it up to where it's not just a big old huge paved parking lot down through there. At least that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no height minimums or anything, or height minimums or anything like that, so it wouldn't obscure buildings necessarily wholesale, but you'd be encouraged, kind of the natural feel.
I really don't have a problem with this, other than, again, a little bit over the restrictive, possibly only native trees. Is there any reason?
I believe Mrs. McPhail requested native species be planted, and generally speaking, the rest of the ordinance, anywhere plants are mentioned, we want native species versus non-native species.
Okay,
So I believe that wraps up that section. I don't think we don't want to jump into design standards right now.
okay. All right, so we're gonna table the rest of this till next meeting. And will we try and burn our way through the rest of this and then go back and hit these areas that you're gonna do some homework on?
Yes, sir.
So then by the end of next meeting, this should be thoroughly vetted.
Thoroughly.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your all's patience. Next on the agenda item, planned development districts.
If I may. The gallery asked the question, what brought this up? We spent some time, a couple meetings, on the small area rezoning. We lowered that requirement to 50 acres, or we sent that to council at least. Now, that's not the law, but I'm just kind of going with that. Adjusting the PDD, the Planned Development District, would be a complementary bit of legislation to push along with it, because while there hasn't been a run on it in the past, it's because there's been a 200-acre minimum requirement to turn it. It is correct that there's only been one PDD, Planned Development District. It was called Equus. It was a winery, golf course, residential thing up on the lake. And I feel, staff feels that since that standard's been lowered, the small area zoning standard's been potentially lowered, that there's now opportunity to use this. Now, what a PDD does, it basically does what our zoning, or our overlay is gonna do. It's gonna allow them, the developer, to write the rule book for their community. So that's really what we're doing. So everything, the PDD already exists in our zoning code. It's not something new that I came up with. It is an existing zoning, part of our zoning code. Anything in red, I added. Anything struck through, the only thing that really struck through was that number 1, about middle of the page, because that's the only place it's listed. There's no other usage of those words. I mean, so that's why that struck through. So any questions or anything of that nature?
Does staff think the 25-year, whatever you want to call it here, that if they go into the PDD, they have to wait 25 years to come out? Do you think that's a good number?
The reason I chose 25 years was something along the lines of a mortgage, because if, say right now, someone wants to build a PDD, and they're gonna build it, we're gonna pull out 0 lot lines, we're gonna put it up to a certain number of feet, we're gonna put road standards being such, way out of what current county recommends, and then say the developer's like, well, this isn't really working, I'm gonna rezone this some other way to make this better. Well, now we have all this non-conforming stuff sitting in there. So if someone wants to do a PDD, this is gonna marry them to the Planned Development District for the lifetime, at least, of a mortgage cycle, give or take. That's the reasoning of keeping it there. That way we don't give them a plan like, oh, it's this, now it's this kind of thing. So we could definitely change that number to be less or completely remove it. It was just more of a safety to marry people to the PDD.
So the PDD allows the developer to write the rule book.
Mm-hmm.
This says if you wanted to go that route, you gotta be married to it.
Correct. And anything else in red there was our thoughts on kind of adjusting it, kind of giving us a little more, us staff, a little more way to look at these before it goes to council, the planned development districts, versus just saying, oh, thanks for the plan, now go to council. And I've incorporated some things that we talked about down on the chart here, as far as open space to density. I figure if we're gonna talk about multifamily in the future, we should have some sort of continuity. So if we're gonna talk about tying density to open space, which I think is a fantastic idea, then it should be kind of similar throughout any sort of potential multifamily, which this could become. You could use this to make a multifamily.
So going back real quick to the 25-year, I know that
Sure.
was a number that you stuck in there from a mortgage standpoint. when a developer's doing a subdivision and designing around an HOA, those HOAs have a certain longevity to them, either 10 or 20 years to them oftentimes. Why wouldn't we just set it up? I mean, if a developer has to be married to their development under the same situation, when they write the HOA, once it's set out and given to the HOA, there's a period of time that lasts unless so many members get together and decide to change it.
Okay.
I think it's a 10-year, but I hear it's going to, if it's not already, a 20-year.
Okay.
As a number to match up to.
That's an excellent rationale. So do we think it's 20? Is that the?
It may be getting in touch with an attorney who's typically writing the HOAs, but I'm thinking that they have.
Everyone's
There's
thinking
no
too.
set requirement, and this
So-
comes down to, there was legislation last year that was looking at some requirements for new, but no, none of that.
So-
They're just basically corporations.
So we're seeing on the lake 10 or 20 years. As far as those HOA, these rules are applicable for 20 years and then they're renewed by the HOA or not renewed.
I've seen them in its different areas, but over the course of time, nothing is stated at all. I've probably seen more where nothing is stated. It's along the lines of what Mr. Markovich said. It's a corporation, they can amend and change once it's turned over from the owner to the HOA. I mean, they've got the board and can change it. I'm not familiar with all that many that have a specific year time, and I can't say what would be. I know some folks who do practice with HOAs can tolerate that. I'm glad to ask, but
I mean,
I'm familiar with the standard.
I mean, the PDD that came through for the winery, I mean, basically, I mean, this is a guideline. It's pretty much gonna be negotiated out if we want that plan development in Oconee County. So, I mean, to me, this is a nice guideline. I don't think we need to get down into the weeds on this, because it's gonna be, when they submit their plan, they're probably gonna give some gives and takes, and so to me, this is something that, yeah, it's already in. The one that came through, the winery that came through, that was never built, I mean, the process seemed to work excellent. I was on a board at that time, and we had 2 or 3 meetings, voted to approve it, and it eventually, didn't come to fruition. But anything in here, again, is probably gonna be negotiated out in the PDD if they want something special. So, I don't see reason to bury ourselves in this one, and if you feel like the changes are needed to start the negotiation, then I'm all for it.
If we can do it without amending, because I said, I'm glad you have the experience with it. So if we have the power to kind of press them to change things or to have things that are in such a way that we're looking for in the future, then definitely, yeah. That was just done because because it's brought down to 50 acres.
Yeah.
Sure.
Again, the last time we did it as a county, it worked pretty good. I think Paul was around at that time. Just they didn't build the project after we spent many meetings on it, so.
But what if they get into a situation like he was talking about? They get in there and they get special stuff done and all of a sudden they want to rezone it into something else. Shouldn't they be required to, some length of time to stay this, and instead of rezoning into something else and then having to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals to get maybe permission to leave certain things that they've done that they wanted in PDD? I mean, say there's no setbacks. Say they build everything up here, but now they want to go residential. They decide they're not going to do any of the commercial stuff. They're just going to build houses or something. Then they've got all these buildings on the property that do not meet any of our zoning codes. And they have to get special permission from the Board of Zoning Appeals to go to another zoning district because they've got all this stuff here. But if they would look at it more seriously and say, yeah, well, let me make sure that I really want to do this, if they know that they've got to have it for 25 years.
Well, no, I'm saying that 25 years is fine. I'm saying, no, I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm saying I'm not objecting to any of these changes.
Oh.
I'm sorry if you misunderstood me.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm just,
Clarification, a PUD, plan development doesn't go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, they go directly to county council.
right.
That's the whole purpose of having a plan development.
Okay,
Right.
but still, if they come in and they wanna be this where they can write their own rules, basically, and then halfway into it, they decide, well, they've already done all this stuff, they didn't want this and didn't want that, and they've already put it in place, and then they go, oh, wait a minute, we don't wanna do this, and then we wanna be zoned something else. All the stuff they have on that property has to be approved or changed somehow. It may not be within residential, because residential has setbacks. Maybe they didn't want their setbacks to be, but 5 foot on the front and whatever. But that don't fit in any of our other zoning classes. So if we require them, they have to be PDD for a set number of years, they will think more, at least a little longer and go, okay, do I really want to do this? Do I really want this zoning classification? And it'll make it, they'll discuss it more within their, whoever's doing it. And that may be what happened to the guy, that wanted the winery and all. He figured out he couldn't do this and then be zoned something else later.
Mr. Reed?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think maybe I'm a little sick, so I might be missing it, but I think what might be being missed is that these are negotiated out deals. They go through a stepped out process with you all and then with council. A lot of these provisions are negotiated in, much like a development agreement. And then they gotta be built out that way, or they don't have that protection, and they can be, privileges can be clawed back. So it's not like the developer can really just write their own way and without any oversight, either at the beginning or through the process. So maybe I'm missing what your concerns are, but a lot of those, in my experience, are addressed through the negotiating process and through council when they decide to approve it or not to.
But if they negotiate something that doesn't fit in any of our other zoning stuff, and council approves it, and we don't have a requirement that says they have to be this for 25 years, then say they go ahead and do this work, whatever it is, 5 years down the line, they decide, well, I don't like PDD, I want to go back to residential or lake residential or whatever. Then they have to come back to council and get an exemption because they've already done something on the land that don't fit any of our other zoning. So how would they be able to change their zoning classification if they've already got a certain building on the property that don't fit into anything? They'd have to go before somebody to get an exception.
Not if it was permitted that way at the beginning. I mean, it would be taken away a right that they were granted by council, so they couldn't divest themselves of their right if someone tried to zone out of it, unless I'm misunderstanding you. I don't see how it creates a problem legally, but I mean, I think I understand your concern. Like I said, I might be being obtuse based on clogging of head, but I think that generally is handled through the negotiation process, and then you have the resulting product, and it is what it is at that point. So,
Any other comments? Okay. No, I mean, the PDD, once it's approved by council, it's the law of the land, and they just can't come back in a few years and change it willy-nilly. So, I don't see the,
Okay.
Again, tell me again, just so I understand for sure, what triggered this with the small area zoning?
Because, so beforehand, so right now, because there are two different kinds of zoning and for gallery. So with our initial zoning from control-free district to anything else, it was required 200 acres, 200 acre minimum for this kind of thing. Looking at a smaller amount, 50 acres, which is now seen in front of council, or should be, I believe tomorrow night. If 50 acres becomes the standard, this PDD perhaps starts to look a little more palatable to a developer. Say, okay, well, I don't need 200 acres out of the control-free district, I just need 50 acres now. Okay. Oh, well, what can I do with the control-free district? Oh, look, I can go through these negotiations and come up with something. So this is a byproduct of us switching. This could be something that's utilized, a tool that's utilized by developers. So looking at this as one of those tools, the first thing that pops up, especially if you want to do something small, like a traditional neighborhood development or something that's, Mayberry-esque, this could be utilized as a tool for, especially at 50 acres.
All right, then I recommend we wait until council votes on the 50-acre minimum.
Okay.
Small area zoning. If that gets approved, then we revisit this next meeting
Certainly.
and go from there. Because I don't want to pass something that might get changed.
Of course.
That hasn't gotten passed. All right, before everybody falls asleep, any old business? Any objection tabling this till after? Okay.
No.
All right. Don't want to be king up here. Old business?
Oh, I know all this.
New business?
I got a question. Do y'all have any objection, us saying the pledge before our meetings?
No?
I'm on board.
Do I need to make a motion?
I don't know if you need to, but you're welcome to.
Well, let's just do it.
Well, I think that I make a motion that we say the pledge, council does it after invocation or before?
Yeah, right after
Okay,
invocation.
right after the, invocation at all of our meetings from this point forward.
Second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Like to thank the audience tonight for coming. Got some new faces out there. And just, I want to clarify that everything that we're discussing is in the discussion phase. We've asked for a joint meeting between county council. We're following county council's instructions as far as corridors and overlays. We are going to have a joint meeting that's open to the public on the
October 24th at 6 p.m. here.
October 24th at 6 p.m. Is there public comment at that meeting?
I don't believe the agenda's been finalized, so I'm uncertain at the time.
Again, appreciate that, everybody, got a few more people in the audience. And, again, everything we're discussing here, is a discussion. So, with that.
Who else is going to be at that meeting? Is everyone except me going to be able to be there?
Gwen is a maybe,
But all four of you are going to be there.
as far as I know. And I think, Paul, all county council is still on board?
As far as I know.
So, anyway, all right. With that, I had a motion to adjourn.
Actually, you had a question? You had something about seating, Mr. Parsons? Seating?
Oh, thank you. We do have access to have our meetings down here like we had before. Do y'all want to do that again, or do y'all want to stay up here? I mean, I know before it was.
I'm fine with being here.
I'm good where we are.
Okay, I know
This is a
before it was
comfortable
the.
chair.
Yeah, and I say that for two reasons. One complaint was we had our backs to the audience a lot, and I think this allows us to communicate with Mr. Root and staff better, and the audience can look us in the face and we can let them know. So, but I think, I did. When we were sitting around the tables, somebody's back was always to the audience, no matter what, and I don't think that's right. So, anyway, all right. With that,
Can I make one more real quick comment? I want to apologize if anyone took my comments at the last meeting as attacking them. That was not my intention. I am very passionate. I lived here all of my life. I believe in Oconee County. I believe in business. I believe in the least restrictions possible, and I'm passionate about that. And please don't take it personally. I'm just trying to stand up for the people of this county.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's your, I think you're doing a great job of doing that. And I think that's what all of our jobs are, we're trying to speak passionately for who we're hearing
Who we're
about.
representing, yeah.
Get well. Meeting adjourned.
Andy, thank you. I think everybody's doing a great job. And I think that's what it is.
If we can't voice our true opinions, then we're wasting our time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We should all be sitting here as passionately as possible,
I agree, totally.
discussing it. And either
Thanks, sir.
Either that's sold on this, or somebody brings experience to the table that someone hadn't thought about. I honestly hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to hear opinions, but if we got back to me.